What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV, and I'm becoming real disturbed by the increasing lack of respect for the history of the NBA by younger fans and younger watchers of the sport. And I just did a video about Dwayne Wade, and I mentioned that, in my opinion, Wade is the third greatest shooting guard of all time if you don't include Jerry West on that list. If you include Jerry West, then I have to put Wade at number 4. And a comment from a subscriber of mine kind of bothered me, man. I understand where he was coming from, but I don't like how people aren't showing Jerry West the proper respect that he deserves. All right. Number one, yeah, none of us have watched all of his games, but let's be honest. Have most of us watched every fucking game Dwayne Wade's played? Or do most of us watch highlight films? Or yeah, some of us have watched a lot of his games, but most of us haven't watched every single contest, but we've seen enough of it to make a conclusion about Wade, right? We've observed Wade enough over the past 16 years to make the presumption that he is one of the elite shooting guards of all time. Now, yes, not a lot of Laker games come on anymore, vintage Laker games, which show Jerry West. I saw enough of him in the late 80s into the 90s to see that he was the premier shooting guard of his generation. Moreover, I have heard and watched his contemporaries confirm the opinions of those who have watched him play. Those who actually competed against the man have stated that he was the best shooting guard, and arguably, some have even stated they thought that he was the best all-around player. Now, Oscar Robertson tends to get that nod as far as, all-around game with rebounding, scoring, passing. But the consensus has always been, as far as two-way player, Jerry West was the best in the game. The last year that Jerry West played was the first year that NBA recorded steals. And I think Jerry West only played in like 30-something games or something. And he averaged 2.6 steals per game. Bill Sharman stated that, in his opinion, I'm expanding a little bit on his opinion, but he said that Jerry West stole the ball more than anybody else I've saw. Which is why I've always stated, you've heard me say this before in the past, if steals were a statistic that was measured throughout the entirety of Jerry West's career, and he played 932 games, he probably would be, I would guess, in the top 3, maybe, in steals, somewhere in that range, maybe a little higher. I don't know if he would have caught Stockton, but with the way the game was played, I could see him having seasons averaging 3+ steals per game. So I could see him probably, matter of fact, he probably would have been second. I think it would have been John Stockton with 3,265 steals. Jerry West, probably close to 3,000 steals. Probably in that range. Just because of how the game was played. And I think steals per game were probably higher then. Because you had so many more possessions. And you had years where teams were averaging, this year they're averaging 110 points per game, but you had years back then where these guys were averaging 116, 118 points per game. That's how fast the pace of the game was. But Jerry West was seen as probably the best perimeter defender in his era. and probably just behind Wilt Chamberlain, the game's most dominant scorer for the entirety of the 1960s. The first half of the 1960s is probably was Chamberlain and Baylor. After Baylor started subsiding with the knee injuries in the mid 1960s, then it probably became more Wilt Chamberlain. But then Wilt changed his game. So then, he became less of a scorer or didn't focus as much on scoring, became more of a all-around player. And then toward the end of his career, especially with the Lakers, he started focusing more on defense. But for the second half of the 60s, you can make the argument Jerry West was the game's best scorer. All right? Now, Jerry West came to the NBA fresh off of an Olympic medal for playing on what was then seen as a dream team, which he co-captained with Oscar Robertson. Many people think that that team would have presented a major challenge to the 1992 Dream Team. Some people when I agree with that, they go with these guys were old and slow and unathletic because they look at grainy footage and slow motion of black and white players, which they equate to oldness and slowness, and they don't really have a lot of comprehension ability. But Jerry West quickly dominated the NBA. When he joined the Lakers, they were transitioning from the Minneapolis area to the LA, Los Angeles. And Jerry West flourished in the NBA. And I believe he won one scoring title. I think it was 1969-1970 season. And I believe that's the year that Wilt Chamberlain pretty much was out for the year with that devastating knee injury that he suffered. I want to say Wilt only played like 6 games that year or something like that in a regular season. But there were many times when Jerry West, who himself suffered from serious injuries, had to fill the void of other players on the team that were out with injuries. Now, many people make a lot of the fact that Jerry West was like 1-8 in the NBA Finals, but that's such a simplistic and stupid argument. Now, that's why you rarely hear me say, "Well, LeBron James 3-6." Yeah, sometimes I troll and say shit like that, but it's other factors involved. Okay, Jerry West may have been 1-8 in the finals if you want to make a simplistic argument as if he's an individual player going against an individual Boston Celtic player one-on-one basketball bullshit. Okay, number one, let's not forget that he was playing against the fucking Boston Celtics, which basically had an all-star in every fucking position. Okay, and there's only so much one great player can do or 2 great players can do when you're playing against a fucking team with 5 All-Stars and a future Hall of Famer coming off the fucking bench in John Havlicek. What the fuck are you going to do? It's like having the Golden State Warriors plus another fucking Hall of Famer coming off the bench in his prime. It's like if Golden State have Boogie Cousins coming back, right, Friday, right? And you're playing against that squad, and not only you playing against that team, but then fucking, I don't know, LeBron James is coming off the bench and shit. What the fuck are you going to do with that team? But Jerry West tried as he might. And what really hurt the Lakers was that they really were weak at the center position. You don't think that Bill Russell looked at a guy like, what was his name, Daryl Imhoff, and licked his chops? I gotta go get Imhoff tonight. I'm gonna score tonight. Come on now. It's not like Jerry West went to the finals and choked. All right? Jerry West went to the finals, and more often than not, he put up unbelievable numbers. And oftentimes, You hear me make points about efficiency. Oftentimes, one of the reasons why they lost some of them games, and I hate to say this, there was a battle a little bit between who was the leader of this team, Elgin Baylor or Jerry West. Earlier on, it was Elgin Baylor. But by the mid-1960s, it was becoming increasingly clear that Jerry West was now the superior of the two players, but oftentimes Elgin Baylor shot jacked, and sometimes he shot jacked the Lakers out of series. You can make the case that it happened in some of the NBA Finals. Elgin Baylor was a career 43% shooter. Jerry West, I think, was over 48%. 5% for a disparity for a career is huge. Jerry West, during the year where Elgin Baylor first suffered a knee injury, I think it was 1964-65 season, in the first round series against the then Baltimore Bullets, Jerry West averaged an NBA record which still stands, and this was 50 plus years ago. He averaged 46.3 points per game, I believe it was, in that series. Okay? 46.3 points per game. Made it to the NBA Finals. Lost to the Boston Celtics. Remember, there's no Elgin Baylor there. So he has to do everything. Scoring 40, 50 points in games in the finals. Same thing happened later on with the expansion draft in the late 60s. They lost Gail Goodrich, who eventually came back to the club, lost him to the expansion Phoenix Suns at the time. Then later on, when Wilt Chamberlain came there, he was out for the whole year, like I mentioned earlier. So there's all these times when Jerry West is doing practically every fucking thing, getting triple doubles, rebounding, all these different things, man. Another thing too, Jerry West was not 6'2". I don't know why the NBA lists him as 6'2", but he was not 6'2", and he even said this in an interview a couple years ago. He actually was around 6'3.5", which I kind of thought, because when I used to watch him in games, I'm like, this guy's not 6'2". There's no way he's only an inch taller than Isaiah Thomas. There's no fucking way. I said, there's no way he's only 6'2". You could just look at him. He was not 6'2". So that means he was more or less about the same height, maybe fractionally taller than Dwayne Wade. And I think Dwayne Wade had a very good career. So please don't use his height as a try to degrade it degrade this guy and say, oh, well, in today's game he wouldn't do it. That's fucking bullshit. The guy had a tremendous vertical leap, especially when he was younger. He played the small forward position when he was in college. He was a skilled rebounder for his size. All right. And he was a great playmaker. In his career, he averaged 27 points per game. At the time of his retirement, and for about 20 plus years, this was the record for shooting guards as far as scoring average is concerned. And I think nowadays the only player to surpass him as far as shooting guards is concerned is Michael Jordan. I think Allen Iverson's scoring average is slightly below 27 points per game for the regular season. I want to say like 26 plus or something like that. In the playoffs, Jerry West averaged 29 points. I think it was 29.2 points per game in the playoffs. And at the time of his retirement, that was the record. Since then, he's only been surpassed by two NBA players, to my knowledge. Michael Jordan at 33.4 points per game, and Allen Iverson at 3 points per game. I also want to say something else too before I end this video. Jerry West, let's see something here. I want to see where he's ranked all time in playoff scoring, because I want to make a good point about something. Just give me a minute. Now, we all know that LeBron James passed Michael Jordan in career playoff points. Might have been the year before last or last year. But let's see something, okay? LeBron James is number one at 6,911. LeBron James has had 13 playoff appearances. Michael Jordan, 5,987. 13 playoff appearances. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, 5,762. 18 playoff appearances. All right. Right now, Jerry West is 8th all-time, 4,457 points and 13 playoff appearances. But this is the point I have to make about Jerry West. When Jerry West played, there were fewer rounds. There were fewer rounds in the playoffs. And what Jerry West was doing in his era was similar to LeBron James as far as making it to the finals every year. Now, whether or not he won it every year, he didn't. He lost 8 out of 9 NBA Finals appearances. But he made it every year. And if you put him in today's playoff structure, he would be the all-time points leader, I think, still. If not, he'd be number 2. He'd be higher on this list because, for the first few years, it was 2 rounds of the playoffs. I think it was 2 years. It was the first round, and if you won that series, you went on to the NBA Finals. There was no semifinals. There was no conference finals. So you're taking away at least 8 games if there was a sweeps. And as a matter of fact, I think the first round was best, 1 out of 2? Best 1 out of 3 or something like that. So there's a lot of games that these guys are playing now that didn't exist back then. So Jerry West really should be taken into consideration. That's why I get irritated when people say, well, Jerry West wasn't as good. Are you kidding me, man? This guy was a fucking monster. They didn't count block shots when he played. They didn't count steals when he played. So do we really know if Michael Jordan is the all-time leader in blocks for shooting guards? Do we really know if John Stockton is the all-time leader in steals? Unofficially, Jerry West has had some quadruple doubles. He's had games with 26 points, 10 rebounds, 12 assists, unofficially 10 blocks, or a game with 35 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists, 12 steals unofficially, because they didn't officially count these stats. But the official statistician who watched the game had these numbers. So there should always be an asterisk. I don't understand why the NBA doesn't do that. There should be an asterisk by some of these records because we don't really know if these guys are the true all-time leaders. Or they should say at least since the 73-74 season. Players before may have eclipsed these numbers, but it won't count, blah, blah, blah. They don't do that. So my thing is this, man. Respect this man. He's one of the all-time great shooting guards. Even if you think Dwayne Wade's better than him, don't sit up there and shit on this guy because you don't know anything about him. All right? So I suggest that you watch some game footage. And there's no doubt in my mind that he would be a successful NBA player today. All right? In shoes, he would be over 6'4". He had at least a 35, 36-inch vertical leap, maybe higher than that. Lightning quick release, had probably the quickest release in the NBA of his generation. Maybe something like Stephen Curry. He had 3-point range in a time when there was no 3-point line. And that's another thing. He was putting up these numbers without the benefit of a 3-point line. So in that series, when he averaged 46.3 points per game, if there was a 3-point line, he might have averaged 50 points in today's NBA in that series. Great rebounder for his position, the best perimeter defensive player in the game at this time. Y'all gotta put some respect on this fucking man's name.